I'm Guido Frosini. I started 6 years ago to work on my family's land. It's been in continual production since 1867 out in the Valley Ford area. We run right now Wagyu cattle. They're a Japanese breed. Wa means beef and gu means Japanese. We started having a closed herd and inline breeding, which means just because there's such a selective few, the breed itself, it's been a national treasure since '93, so no genetics have been exported from Japan since then. So the state of Washington is the first state that imported them, together with Texas. So we have a very few selective gene pool in the states. So we have 3 different lines, mostly for maternal traits or carcass traits, that we inline breed with certain cows to get the best conformation for out there on the coast. For parasite resistance, fly resistance, gains. So I started 6 years ago. It was my first experience with agriculture, and originally I'm from Florence, Italy. My mother's from Oakland. I came to the States 8 years ago and started studying botany and horticulture, and I was always fascinated of means of production. And when I came here, there was this huge disconnect with food. Everybody didn't have a table in their kitchen, and people would always go out to eat, and there was very little connection there. So I called my great aunt up, Ione Conlon, and I asked her if there was a possibility for me to help out on the ranch, and that started 6 years ago. Since then, it's been a very steep learning curve. I worked in Hawaii on the island of Molokai on 10,000 acres. We were doing red Devons. That was my first experience with mostly grass management. I met Gerald Fry, which he's a famous, he likes to select cattle through phenotypes as opposed to DNA tests. So more like an old school kind of approach to what kind of selection. Started there. That was my first time learning biodynamic also methods of production, so all Steiner, and more like a spiritual aspect and community approach to the food we raise and what we eat. That food is not a commodity, and because if it's a commodity, it has a value to it, and the value will fluctuate, and if you eat that, I mean, you too will fluctuate to an extent. So if the food you eat isn't that great, then you won't feel that well either. So I'm an idealist, I'm young, started this. I learned about grasses not even 2 years ago. And since then, it's opened a whole new world. Like Lauren was saying, like there's always something to learn. And since then, it's just a matter of reading and a different approach, systematic fencing, using electric fences, doing high density grazing, where you put multiple cattle on an acreage. So it's stocking density and not stocking rate. Stocking rate is how many cattle you have throughout the whole acreage, and stocking density is how many you have per acre. So sometimes we might have 200 head on 1 acre or half acre for 6 hours, 8 hours. And usually we approach that looking at the grasses, and each grass will have 3 tillers, so 3 blades coming up. That's when you know it's mature and it's rested enough. And there's different types of grasses. There's usually just your average annual monocot. And you'll see it, and the grasses usually come up, and you look at ruminants' tongues, and the way their tongue reaches down to grab grass, the grass will show you when it's ready to graze too, because it lays it down. And this is my view of grass too. It's the grass when it's ready to be grazed will lay down slowly, and the animal just comes and harvests it. And that's when there's a perfect energy balance of energy to protein ratio and fiber, which is what they need. So we were just a cow-calf operation at the beginning. We were also selling to Harris, the quality insurance program. And since I was there, we transitioned from the cow-calf operation, which is, again, raising those calves up to a certain weight, weaning them and selling them directly, and then never seeing them again, and possibly buying them again Safeway without raising our own. So we tasted one of our first Wagyu Angus crosses. We thought it was delicious. It took a little bit longer to raise them, but it was worth the wait. And that's how we got started. And then realizing that we want to sell direct to people. We want to know where it came from. Partially, the farmers market for us are a means of promoting our CSA, because through farmers markets we've not seen a profit. But definitely it's bringing people and an educational process to show them like what's possible, and also how our government, to an extent, with NRCS or the USDA, there's no real monetary incentive to do ecosystem services. There's conservation easements, there's some money for endangered species, but very little in comparison of if you're managing grasses correctly, you're giving a habitat to a whole lot of things that nobody really sees unless you come out. So partially we're trying to educate people that part of the cost of the grass-fed beef, and not just because it's just grass-fed and finished, it's because there's ecosystem services provided also at the same time. It's for the marsh hawks, for the kites, for the migratory birds, especially we're 2 miles from the coast, so we're right on the line there. And that's part of what you can come out and see. So that's where, through that, it's a CSA box that we provide, and then the farm tours that we do partially as an educational means. And I work with a chef, so depending on the seasonality of the product, because everything comes within our region, we don't have the opportunity of when it's dry out there in August and September to go graze somewhere in Northern California. So our beef gets fat seasonally. So yes, steaks are great 4 or 5 months out of the year, but then the rest is better stew or roasts. So that's why we started a pig program. So we're doing large blacks and Tamworths right now, and experimenting with some guinea hogs, which Samantha is also raising. We actually got breeding stock from her. And what we saw is value added. The value added part, like Doug was saying, like being able to cook at the farm tours, these meals, giving recipes in our CSAs. And with pork that we raise, we've been trying to do different breeds and then curing the meats. And we didn't really see anybody doing a small scale operation of just like tasters. So right now we're just in an experimental phase. When people come, we just get to taste, we see what people think. And it's like, this came from a large black, this came from a Tamworth, this came from a Berkshire. And so this was finished 45 days on barley. This wasn't just whey and bread. And sometimes you can taste the difference. The barley one was the best. Next year, in fact, we've gotten a grant to experiment with grazing barley. So since our beef kind of ends around August to be really fat, still good, but not as fat, grass, then in the fall, fattening pigs, rotational grazing them with still one-line electric fence on barley fields. So the cost would just be of planting barley. And it's hard to find non-GMO barley too. And yes, so the value added is what we're trying to focus on in education. And again, trying to make it sustainable, because when I was there 6 years ago, yes, we were making around $75,000 selling the calves to Harris, but there was no pride, there was no education. It's just like, this is private property, don't come on. And we have multiple certification. We're certified organic, animal welfare approved, American grass fed. But it means nothing unless you come up and you see what the place looks like, and then come back next year. And if there's no improvements, and you can see more like trees, or the waterways, a cleaner water coming through in winter, and then it means there's no improvement. So that's part of the value. And that's why we want to really grow a customer base that values that. And that's who we want to feed, and vice versa. Then you feed us with trade or monetary trade.
Nice.